superhero named Tony. It's called Tony's Thing.
My name is Jim Jeffers. I'm an intermediate artist. My work flows through different boundaries of conventional media, digital media, sculpture, painting, photography, performance. Performance art has less defined boundaries between itself and the audience. Like in theater, you would generally take on some sort of persona, but a lot of times in performance art, that boundary is kind of shady. So you never know is it make-believe, is it not make-believe? I mean, there's lots of performance art that is just, in some ways, constructed like theater. There's a looser relationship between the audience and the performer. I mean, that's sort of a neo-Dadaist breakdown that sort of happened between life and art, where post-abstract expressionism things started to really get unclear as to whether or not you were dealing with an art persona. An art persona wasn't just a made-up character like Andy Warhol. Were we dealing with Andy Warhol, or were we dealing with Andrew Warhola? So where his performance and his art stopped and started, I don't know. So you might as well just break down all those boundaries. It's all performance art. I got this idea for this superhero performance where I carried a piece of 5/8 inch fire-safe drywall around a block that probably weighs about 150 pounds, and then made a white line around Mason Grove School of the Arts at Rutgers. That's how it started. That was the first superhero one. Since then, most of the superhero performances have been in conjunction with performance nights. Really, it's been superhero actions now since '98, between 3 and 4 a year. I've had audience members come and interfere with the performance. In Massachusetts, I had a guy jump on a white drywall cube I was dragging, and I had to push him off forcefully. If I'm doing a superhero performance that is outdoors, it generally starts in one place and ends in another, or starts in one place, takes you to another place, and then comes back. So it requires the audience to get up and move. Superheroes are, they're always like wrecking stuff, or like, leaving claw marks in the door. They're all about like leaving their mark in the world. I think they've gotten somewhat more elaborate. The all-over painted suits, I've only done 2 of those, and those were very labor-intensive. It takes hours and hours and hours to paint a Tyvek suit. Say, for instance, for White Rabbit, it was conceived as a white performance, but it also was easier to do in white because everything came in white. But I still had to paint the drywall and laying down the fire strips. That was very labor-intensive. Drywall, circles, 2x4s, Tyvek suits, Vans, the shoes I could never afford as a child, even though they weren't expensive, but we were poor. Soundtracks with Fugazi in them. Concrete fulcrums for circle building. Heavy things. Cinder blocks. Paint. Primary colors. Road flares. As a friend of mine says, a safe fire. Fire for safety. So those are sort of the materials. Yeah, these are all sort of elemental, right? You end up with fire, weighty objects, circles, lines. I mean, they're all kind of like basic things in the world. So it's kind of, if you've got a superhero and his power is to basically make the simplest things possible in really large scale. The first performance I did that was a secondary color was green, and that was for Germany, in Berlin. Performance from my dad, green being a fitting color for tanks. I built this object that was similar proportions to a tank. So it was slats of drywall, all put together with about an inch and a half space in between each of them, and then it would draw 10 chalk lines when dragged across the ground. So I started that performance out in a suit, switched to a white superhero Tyvek suit, then switched into a green tank uniform, and carried this drywall downstairs, outside, and then dragged a circle around the entire art center, and had a big entourage of people following me around this park up through the back, and came to the front where it ended, which just so happened that it went over where the Berlin Wall used to be. So I get to make this performance about my father being one of the first American tanks into Berlin during World War II and simultaneously cross the Berlin Wall, you know, go from East to West Berlin and come back around and drawing white chocolate. So my girlfriend of several years had been living in my house, in our house, and had decided that we would no longer be a couple, but continued to live together. So we divided this house. And the way that sort of initially manifested itself was through the Solomon performance, where I just cut everything in half. I cut 3 drywall pieces in half in different ways. One was vertical, one was horizontal, and then one was circles cut out of it, so it approximated half of the drywall was cut with circles. So I was living with this person who was kind of, we were constantly at odds and having like real trouble, but still there. She was always obsessed with bad energies and how the place, you know, we gotta get that. She was always trying to burn sage so I decided that, okay, well, if there's ghosts here, let's photograph them. So what happened was when she eventually moved out, I was left with this big empty blue room. So I started taking the Poltergeist series. So I started taking these long exposure photographs, eventually adding an LED element to it, allowing the light emitting diode to emit more light and it could get different effects. Initially I thought superheroes. The first thing I did with the light, of course, was give myself a halo. So what do I have now? I have saints, superheroes, and ghosts. And they're all kind of similar things, I think, in the world. The summer of 2002, I guess, I was spending a lot of time at jadetree.com following Jets to Brazil, and liked their format and liked how they were setting things up. So I thought, well, you know, I'll start making up these fake covers and making the titles kind of funny. So it was Vacation Bible School, X-Ray Fool, Superhero Tantrum, Archback Ranger, Extra Car Party, Good Touch, Bad Touch, and Knowing the Difference. A lot of the stuff found on the internet, a lot of stuff born from internet pornography. So there's like these bands that are kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but they sound very much like a band that you would see on MTV. And what occurred to a friend of mine, she said, you know what you're doing? You're like creating your own little world. That's been something that keeps reoccurring to me. Yeah, I'm making my own popular culture, which is exactly what I always wanted to do. How did I get into video art? Well, again, like most things, there was a girl involved. No. Actually there was. Julie Wolf, or back then she was Jay Wolf. We were living together in Brooklyn, and we were seeing all the cool stuff that was being made with video. So what we decided to do was go buy a VHS-C camera. Or the last couple videos I've made first started with California, which was airplanes. With that, the idea that all these people are leaving, it ran a ticker tape across the bottom of town names, and all the towns were either in California or Canada, because the two big relationships in my life, I was unwilling to accept the place that that person wanted to live. And from that, sort of went on to more kind of heartbreak and relationship work and that kind of stuff. So then the whole 4LVS cycle started. It was about just, in the span of things, a short relationship, but it was like a lot of intense, interesting activity. So the 4LVS cycle sort of documents moments of that in a kind of self-portrait kind of way. Then completely shift gears into a kind of formal activity, kind of contemplative, I guess, kind of lonely activity, which were the sort of Skyrider videos, where I found these kind of acts that were happening if you look straight up in the sky, really interesting. Whether it was power lines moving by, the clouds, airplanes, helicopters, whatever, that kind of activity. And so they're shot from a car, and that, whatever that audio is you're hearing, is the audio that was happening at that moment. It's not superimposed audio. And those kind of serendipitous events happening simultaneously that where the music works out to sync up with the visual, I think is amazing. It's kind of like if you just start watching something and listening and how the world synchronizes itself. It's the synchronicity of those events. Why do I teach? Because it pays the bills. Art doesn't pay the bills. And it's rewarding, certainly. It's rewarding. You get to see people come in from all walks of life and come out utterly enriched. People come in and say, I don't understand contemporary art. I don't understand why anyone would make this. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. And the next thing you know, like a semester later, they're like, oh my god, I saw the Ernesto Neto show. It was so much fun. You got to climb in a suit and get in this big foam thing. I went and saw Fisher Spooner. Oh my god, they spewed chocolate on us. Like, oh, cool, yeah. Because strictly, performance art and video art sucks compared to like real theater and a lot of times that stuff's way more cool. Buffy, an episode of Buffy versus a video class? Come on, we all know who wins. Like Buffy. The little like music comes on, you're like, but I think in art, if it's interesting, then it's at least worth looking at. And if it's worth looking at, then it's worth something. So either you can hate it so much that you want to see it again, or you love it so much you want to see it again. Being able to make something that someone would want to live with is pretty cool, I think. It's a big step. It's usually not the end result of, say, 2 years of MFA training, which is usually to make art form art where people write about, that get bought by museums. I mean, for years and years and years, that idea of, oh, it's going to hang above someone's sofa was kind of a detraction. But I kind of think of that as like a compliment, right? Someone wants this crap to hang above their sofa. And that's kind of nice. They're going to be there living with this thing forever. They have stories about it, and it lives. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. Art's fun. I mean, it's hard work, but it's fun. Being an artist probably won't have a Porsche, but can have some fun. Unlimited resources, what would I do? You mean in terms of like a project? Like what would billboards. I want Houston and Broadway. Like I want the side of the building. I want the Casio G-Shock. I want that size art to be put out in the world. Like stupid superhero shit, like up on the billboard. You know, you can do crotch shots. It'll be all right. They'll love it.